rain and flooding and what have you, there were damage to the track. And John Hess had a repair train up the Conemaugh River Valley. He was a mile and a half out of East Conemaugh when he heard the Johnstown flood. He never actually saw it. He heard the sound of the flood in the distance, threw his locomotive into reverse and sped all the way into East Conemaugh, where the Pennsylvania Railroad had its turning and repair yards, and he tied down the whistle of the train, his train's locomotive, and ran to get his family to higher ground. In fact, people paid attention to locomotive whistles, and really hundreds of people were able to evacuate East Conemaugh and Franklin boroughs. At least that end of the valley got some good warning, unlike the rest of the valley. There were two sections of the Day Express, actually, that were being held at East Conemaugh. They had been held there for a number of hours because landslides were blocking the track to the east of East Conemaugh. The actual death toll from the Johnstown flood was impossible to know, in part because of the many out-of-towners that died here during the disaster. Ironically enough, one section of the Day Express was badly devastated. Nearly everyone died on it. And the other section was relatively miraculously saved. Of the 2,200 victims of the Johnstown flood, only a handful, about a half a dozen, 6, 7, were African American. One of them was a porter on the Day Express. The wave, again, pushed everything in its path. Locomotives from East Conemaugh, 80-ton locomotives, were carried as far as a mile, nearly a mile, by the force of this awesome wave. There's even a phenomenon known as the flood wind. The wave was displacing so much air that you had a second before the masthead. Eyewitnesses claim to have seen 3-foot diameter hardwood trees snap off just by the force of the wind that preceded the wall of water and wreckage. The wave cut through the lower ends of East Conemaugh and Franklin, and then plowed through the Cambria Iron Company's model town of Woodvale. Woodvale had been laid out and built not too many years before the Johnstown flood. There was no alcohol sold in Woodvale. The major industries up there were a brickworks and a woolen mill. The woolen mill gave employment to wives and daughters of mill workers. Woodvale was compared to a small New England frame town, 255 houses, sort of a pretty part of Johnstown, and it was literally wiped clean by the Johnstown flood. All 255 houses were demolished by the Johnstown flood. The only building remaining in Woodville after the flood passed was part of the ruined wall of the woolen works. In all, there were, of course, about 30,000 people living in Johnstown. It's estimated that something like 20,000 were living in neighborhoods that were actually struck by the Johnstown flood wave. And with the death toll of 2,200, the loss of life, of course, was about 1 in 10, which is as awesome and as terrible as that is. It's really kind of surprising that the loss of life wasn't much higher. The officials, for 6 weeks after the flood, expected the death toll would be at least 10,000. And when you looked at the destruction of Johnstown, you really could not imagine there'd be any way that anyone could have survived it. So as bad as the death toll was, it really was surprisingly small considering the ferocity of this event. Pennsylvania Railroad it was the biggest corporation in America, probably in the world at that time. Sure. Had a lot of detractors, and the Johnstown flood is where they really shined. In fact, for years, that was their kind of bragging rights, was all the wonderful relief effort and all the how they had expedited relief to Johnstown. I mean, the Pennsylvania Railroad was hugely important in immediate relief of Johnstown. One of the things I like about this film, this production, is the use of artwork, period artwork. And this is how newspapers and magazines communicated in 1889. They didn't really have, they hadn't perfected the technology of using photographs. So there's a wonderful legacy of artwork that were used for newspapers, for magazines, for other publications. Magazines went all the full gamut from highbrow to working class magazines like the Police Gazette, which was wont to show scantily clad women, struggling to survive the Johnstown flood. It was sort of the Playboy magazine of 1889. Generally, the impression I have always gotten was that there was not a whole lot of wounded and injured people after the Johnstown flood. You either survived or you didn't survive. The deaths from some contagious diseases was relatively low, so that the need for medical relief here was not nearly as bad as people first estimated. After Woodville, the flood wave went through a notch in the hillside and compressed together. It was estimated that the wave reached a height of 37 feet high at its crest as it entered Johnstown. And then right at the edge of the downtown district, Johnstown borough itself, was the Gautier Wire Works, a section of the Cambrian Iron Company above Johnstown. And when the flood wave hit the boilers and furnaces there, they just exploded. People, when they saw the flood wave, saw this explosion of steam and wreckage and locomotives, and it all had again, this black cloud, and it made this awesome sound. It was compared to thunder as it came into the downtown section. A lot of people had literally no idea what it was. The wave, after it hit the Gautier plant and came into the broad floodplain at Johnstown, spread out and formed into three major currents. One followed the Little Conemaugh River, one went basically straight ahead across the center part of Johnstown, and a third one went above in the upper end of downtown out into the Kernville Borough neighborhood. They all crashed against the hillside, Yoder Hillside, right past downtown Johnstown, and then backwashed up the Stony Creek River, which is the other river it meets here in Johnstown. Really formed a big eddy in the downtown district. And the worst was really over in 10 minutes. Johnstown was destroyed in 10 minutes. The stone houses, the brick houses, either held or just disintegrated. They were described as looking like sugar melting in water. The frame houses usually picked off their foundation and floated off, and people survived floating in their houses or on their roofs. The section with the survivor on the train, he's on a bridge. I don't believe that is actually Johnstown. I think that's South Fork Village. There was a section of passenger train that had gone through Johnstown east and was being held in South Fork, which was of course right below the dam. And that train, the locomotive engineer was able to get momentary knowledge that the flood wave was coming, was able to pull out of South Fork just as the flood wave tore through the village, and narrowly escaped disaster there. Of course, the wave did catch other sections of passenger train closer to Johnstown. But again, I don't think this describes Johnstown. I think this is way up the other end of the valley. The 19th century reporter collecting stories from different people undoubtedly wasn't confused in this instance. The early newspapers accounts, and it was really hard to get into Johnstown. All the railroad was wiped out, and so the journalists had, it was a high level of difficulty to get into Johnstown. You had to, come in by horse or coming over the mountain or whatever, and it was really rugged situation here. And they were living actually in a cement kiln at one point, and the news was really rough. It was a lot of rumor, and they didn't know much, and so for the first week at least, or even more, what Americans knew about the Johnstown flood, a lot of it was based on hearsay. The survivor accounts of the Johnstown flood make up a amazing body of literature. People were marooned in their homes. Again, there was from 3 to 10 feet of water. The people that had gotten out the afternoon, and they were all heading up to higher ground. But most people stayed in their homes and were, as in previous years, just going to wait out the high water. And when they heard and saw this immense wall of water pouring into the downtown, there was nothing they could do but see what fate had in store for them. Again, these were some of the most intense moments of their lives. The worst of it was over in 10 minutes as the wave hit houses and broke them apart, and people rode off on sections that popped out of their roofs and rode off on sections of roofs, jumping from piece of wreckage to another piece of wreckage. And again, the amazing thing is not the death toll, but truly the number that survived. One of my favorite survivor stories is the one left to us by Victor Heiser, who actually published his autobiography, went on to be president of the World Health Organization and had an illustrious career, but his life was dramatically changed by when the flood wiped out his home and his family. And in fact, last he saw his parents was they were standing watching in horror as the flood wave was coming into downtown Johnstown. And he was out trapped in the backyard and couldn't make it back to the home, so he scampered up the ladder onto the roof of the small stable they had built, and that immediately broke up, and he rode off on the roof. As that raft failed, he jumped from one piece of wreckage to another, and he saw families, he saw people he knew spinning around for a virtual acrobatic act he describes. And when it all stops, when his final raft floats out to Kernville, and for the first time he's not in imminent danger of dying any second, he looks at his watch and just 10 minutes had passed. People floated around for hours, eventually coming to rest behind the stone bridge or finding some place of sanctuary. When the flood hit, these houses exploded or else floated off, and undoubtedly the family pets. Of course, there wasn't as many family pets back then as we have today. Having a dog was an extravagance, and among the working class at least, my impression was that you didn't have the number of animals. Another one of my favorite stories is the story of James M. Walters, an attorney in town. The ironic experience of having his home break up and riding a piece of wreckage and crashing into a surviving building and smashing through a window and finding himself in his own law office, surrounded by strangers who'd found sanctuary there. In fact, Alma Hall did become one of many buildings that were a sanctuary on the night of May 31st. 264 people spent the night in Alma Hall. In fact, they sort of, each floor, the second through fourth, pointed to government. They banned open flames because of the gas, the danger of explosion. Reverend David Bill was in charge of the overall building, and as you imagine, he led them in prayer, and imagine certainly a lot of fervent praying going on that evening. They made it through. In fact, there was a baby born in Alma Hall that night. The stone bridge was a scene of really almost indescribable horror that night. As the film indicates, all the wreckage of Johnstown backed up behind it and it was packed by the force of 20 million tons of water against the bridge. And the wreckage covered 30 acres up to depth of 30 feet, and it was a horrible mass that was bound together with barbed wire that had been picked up at the Gautier plant. And then that whole mass of wreckage caught fire on the night of May 31st. As the film indicates, there was oil soaked down from the mass, from train cars, houses with their coal stoves burning washed against the stone bridge. Anyway, once it started, it burned for over 3 days until the Pittsburgh Fire Department was able to come and put the fire out. The film actually uses one of the popular works of art of the age, the Kurtz and Allison print, which I think probably hung in every barroom wall in America for many years after the disaster. The stone bridge, of course, with the fire, led an extra dimension of horror to an already disastrous day. No one really knows how many people died and survived the flood only to perish in the flames, although the estimates are maybe as many as 80 died in the fire at the stone bridge who had survived the flood. With all the currents forming in Johnstown, there was this, first the wave hit against the hillside and backwashed, and really what you had almost was